Hi and welcome to the NBA show. My name is Morten Jensen and today we're going to be talking about historical trends. In the 1950s and 60s, the name of the game was centers. If you were big and you could score and defend, you were pretty much guaranteed playoff success. That's not to say there weren't effective all-star guards. Bob Cousy comes to mind. But it was still a center-oriented league. Look no further than Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain, and later than that, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in the 70s and part of the 80s. The center was a staple of NBA offenses, and that carried all the way into the 80s and 90s to some extent, even though the 80s kind of changed it a little bit, because there were these two players called Magic Johnson and Larry Bird, maybe you've heard of them, who changed the game by being all-around facilitators and playmakers and scorers from the point guard and small forward position, even though they kind of had the same responsibilities. But it gave the NBA a different look, a different feel. No longer did you need to have that big man who could give you 30 points a game and be the key component of your team. Now you just needed talent. And it didn't really matter all that much whether that talent came from your big position or your small position, as long as you had someone who could actually carry you into the playoffs and preferably to the finals. Michael Jordan solidified that. When Mike came in 1984, he was a shooting guard, but wasn't really known or looked at as an all-around player, at least not initially. He was looked at as primarily just a scorer who could give you 35 points a game. But as he grew and became a better shooter, a better defender, and a better playmaker, he too became a part of that holy trinity of players who could do virtually everything. In fact, Jordan became the best defender of those three, by far. He even won a Defensive Player of the Year award. NBA teams started to look at Michael Jordan and think, how can we emulate that? How can we find that wing scorer who can take us to the promised land, as Michael did with the Bulls in 1991, 92, 93, 96, 97, and 98, just so we don't forget. What they learned was, you can't. Michael was a loner. He was that one rare exception of a guy who could just do virtually everything while winning at the same time. So teams instead pivoted into something else entirely. It was now a mission of theirs to find wing players who could dominate the basketball, be that Kobe Bryant, or Tracy McGrady, or even Allen Iverson in a 6-foot body. You just needed guys who could get the ball from the outside into the paint. So the center, slowly but surely, even though Shaquille O'Neal certainly extended that stay, got phased out. Not to the point of existence, but it changed. After the era of Kobe, McGrady, and Iverson, teams started becoming a little bit more defensive-minded. The Detroit Pistons famously won the NBA championship in 2004 against the Los Angeles Lakers, having virtually no superstar whatsoever. It was a team that had tremendous overall team defense as well as individual defense. And don't think that NBA teams around them didn't notice. The Chicago Bulls, for example, hired Scott Skiles in 2003, and when they saw the Pistons winning in 2004, decided, let's go all in on defense. And they continued that trend with Tom Thibodeau, who got hired in 2010. Defense was suddenly the biggest part of basketball. You wanted everyone to come into the NBA draft to be defensive-oriented. Until, of course, it turned out that players started shooting threes, in which case you had to adapt. And that meant the rise of the stretch four. Now, to be fair, the stretch four had been in place for a while. Clifford Robinson was one. Dirk Nowitzki had been in the league since 1998, so it wasn't a new component per se. But now teams were actively looking for bigs who could shoot the ball. It was just important now. You needed a guy who could set a screen, pop out to the three-point line, and hit a shot. And for some reason, preferably, they had to be European and very, very white. Go figure. Nowadays, that's changed, even though it's still sort of relevant. The power forward position, which we've debated a lot on this channel, is really no more. But you still need the players who play at that slot to be able to shoot. And that's why everything is trending downwards and everything is downsizing, which is the new thing. This is the new trend that we're in. We're seeing teams close games with no one on the floor taller than 6'8" or 6'9". Focus now is on wings. Not necessarily wings of the ilk of Kobe and Tracy or Allen, but more so wings who can just do whatever you need to do. If you're a defensive-oriented wing, that's actually fine. You don't need to be a continuously high-volume scorer. If you're Jimmy Butler and defense is practically your number one thing, and you provide sort of 19, 20 points a game, you can still be that key man on a very, very good team. Because today's NBA focuses on depth, focuses on shooting, and more so than ever before, we're looking at a league that prioritizes fit and togetherness. But even so, on the court, one thing still remains. You need size, not center size, but you need to have wings who are in the 6'7", 6'8" range who can handle the ball to really create that level of overview of the court because of their height. The days of having an Allen Iverson run your team as your primary guy, over. The days of having Shaquille O'Neal drive the paint, over. Now it's about flexibility. You want to play guys out of position, or rather no position at all. It's become a loose term. Maybe that's good, because nowadays it means you're allowing for basically everything. On some level, that's very progressive, and on some level, you have to ask yourself, does that even allow for big players anymore? Or even small players? Will NBA teams ultimately just be 5 guys who are in the range of 6'7" and 6'9"? Maybe. Who's to say? Personally, I could see that trend being true. It wouldn't surprise me whatsoever if a handful of teams trotted out starting lineups with players virtually the same height. That could lead to fantastic basketball. The Boston Celtics and the Los Angeles Clippers are 2 primary examples of this, and they are a very entertaining brand of basketball. But it does raise one question. What about preference? What about taste? If you're a small guy and you really have no one to identify with in the NBA anymore, as so many people did with Allen Iverson, will that lose your will to watch games? Will that make you able to identify less with the NBA? What if you're a big man who can do a ton of things, but the one thing you can't is dribble? Are you then just sort of banned from ever partaking at NBA court, even though that's your dream? There are a lot of questions to this movement. Aesthetically, yes, you could argue this is worse for the game. Quality-wise, however, you could argue the exact opposite. At the end of the day, having different players with different skills and different appearances and different heights and weights is interesting and intriguing. Maybe the NBA should be cautious not to be too homogeneous, because it might ruin the ultimate romanticism about the game of basketball. Now, I'm not one to be emotional. I kind of prefer this type of basketball, to be quite honest with you, but I also understand that ultimately it's a business and you need to please people who watch. In that sense, is this good for the development of the NBA? I don't know. Maybe you do.